Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light. and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness, this is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and this is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. That's right, baby. Yes, huge shout out there to the old Wolfman Jack. He passed away back in 1995. He was a great radio legend, known for his crazy, ravelly voice. That's right, baby. Man, he had some wild shows. I used to love listening to old Wolfman Jack. A lot of people have said that I remind them of him, so shout out to an absolute radio legend who is on the other side listening, I hope, with pride and not shaking his head at me, going, what is this kid doing? Oh my God. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I am Jerry Hicks. Welcome to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Tonight, we're going to get into a very special topic. You see, when I first started this show, my friend Raleigh asked me to do a show about Mr. Edgar Cayce, and I kept putting it off, and it's been on the list for a while, and I have got to do this show for my buddy. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, that is exactly what we are going to talk about: the life and times of the man, the myth, the legend known as Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. This story starts way back in 1877 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which is actually just about 20 minutes away from where I used to live in Clarksville, Tennessee. So it's actually very, very close to home for me, literally. Mind you, there was many years separating us. Still, it's a very close to home subject. Mr. Cayce had a very incredible life. You see, even from childhood, things were just a little bit different.
Edgar claimed he was visited often by his dead grandfather in a barn where the tobacco crops were fired. Edgar said he would tell him stories about the Civil War and let him stroke his chin whiskers. These stories brought ridicule from some, but Edgar's mother and grandmother wouldn't allow him to be ashamed of his ability to see what others did not.
And to have a gift like that was just as taboo then as it is now, if not more so taboo then. And it's amazing that his mother and grandmother actually encouraged it, because that's something you really, really don't find even today, most of the time.
At the age of 7, Edgar began his schooling in this one-room schoolhouse. In his own words, he was a dull student, but then he found a book that interested him, a gift Bible from his parents. He began studying it and soon was inspired to read it once through for every year of his life.
That's one read-through for every single year of the man's life.
You read it every day. You have to read it every day to go through the whole Bible in a year. And he went through that Bible at least 67 or 68 times, at least that many times that he read it. And how many of us can tell we've went through the Bible one time?
I don't know about you. You might have read the Bible once, maybe twice in your life. I've read a good majority of it, but I don't even think I've sat down and read the thing cover to cover before.
Not a bad book to know about.
In May of 1890, at age 13, Edgar's life changed forever. Already a baptized member of the Disciples of Christ Church, Edgar visited his favorite retreat in the woods near his home.
And this is where the true strangeness of the story starts, at a very, very young age for Mr. Edgar. What we're about to hear is a meeting of biblical proportions indeed.
To reread the story of Samson in the vision of Manoah. That night, after Edgar prayed for the ability to help his fellow man, he received a vision of his own. He wrote later, "A glorious light as the rising morning sun seemed to fill the whole room, and a figure appeared at the foot of my bed, an angel or what I knew not. Patiently it said, 'Thy prayers are heard, you will have your wish. Remain faithful, be true to yourself. Help the sick, the afflicted.'"
All right, let's try to put ourselves in that mindset, okay? You have just went to pray in the woods while reading your favorite Bible story, and you have prayed to ask to be able to help people, and all of a sudden you wake up in your bed later on that evening with an angel standing at the foot of the bed. I am not entirely sure exactly how I would react to that. And the angel tells you to take care of the sick, and your wish will be granted. Now, not only was his wish granted, I've thought about this for a long time. The story has some very intriguing elements that we'll get to shortly. But how would you react? I mean, I know I would be kind of mind blown. What about you?
The next day, Edgar was in a daze at school, preoccupied with his vision. He was kept after class for repeatedly misspelling the word cabin. That night, his father tutored Edgar so late that the boy finally begged for a 5-minute break.
He just felt that if he could just sleep on that book a few minutes, he would know it better. So his father, my grandfather, said, "All right, you try it, and I'll be back in 5 minutes." And about 5 minutes later, he came back, and Dad knew every word in the book, which page it was on. And from then on, he just began sleeping on his books, and he became a rather bright student from an average student.
I actually think that's how I passed American history class, because I slept in that class every single day and somehow still passed it with flying colors. I don't know, maybe the questions were just really simple, but maybe I learned through osmosis. But this is a real story so far. To the best of our knowledge anyway. This is a real story of a man who decided that he, after meeting with this angel, had the ability to basically take the knowledge in merely by going into a dream state. This also, for those who don't know the Edgar Cayce story already, becomes extremely important later.
How Edgar learned his lessons this way was a mystery. At the very least, he had developed some sort of photographic memory. He used this ability to land a job at a bookstore by memorizing their sales catalog cover to cover.
And let's consider the idea that maybe Edgar did develop a photographic memory. It's not a very common case, and as a matter of fact, I don't believe there's any in the literature, aside from savant syndrome or some type of extreme traumatic ordeal, that has any case files where people just all of a sudden became a photographic memory person. I've not found a case file yet, and if there's some that people know about, please do let me know. I would like to know. But I don't think anybody has spontaneously gained the ability to have the photographic memory just overnight, especially right after meeting this entity that he was claimed to meet. Now, I find that very intriguing.
In 1892, excitement swept Christian County. Former resident Adlai E. Stevenson was Grover Cleveland's running mate. A day before a victory celebration in Hopkinsville, Edgar received a schoolyard injury when a baseball struck his spine. Later that day, he behaved wildly in class, shrieking with laughter. On the way home, he stood in the street and stopped traffic. That night, Edgar mystified his parents by giving detailed instructions for an herb poultice to be applied to his spinal injury while he slept.
Think about that. While he was asleep, his body, if you will, or whatever was speaking through him at this time already, and we'll get into that more here shortly, but whoever or whatever this was, sleeping or talking through him while he was asleep, was telling them how to cure his body in real time. Now, mind you, this is just a kid. This is not a person, or maybe even a teenager, I guess, but not a person who would have this type of knowledge, especially in-depth knowledge of the body.
In the morning, he remembered nothing of his accident or strange behavior. But now neighbors began to talk, including a local doctor, the father of a young girl Edgar was smitten with.
He led Edgar to believe that he was in danger of going insane. which seems to me the ultimate in cruelty for a doctor to say that to a boy.
And I've often wondered how many people have literally went insane and or been accused of being insane, more so just because they have gifts that others just cannot understand.
Some believe Edgar's psychic powers had been triggered by these boyhood incidences. But before she died, Edgar's grandmother hinted that her husband had powers too, that he could move tables and chairs with his mind.
I find this fact intriguing for two reasons. Number one, the fact that it seems to be hereditary, and it's still something that we find today, that the gifts are passed down through the bloodlines. Also, now we know the reason why Edgar's grandmother actually supported him and did not call him crazy or try to convince him that something was wrong with him.
But Edgar had little time to ponder these mysteries. In 1893, at age 16, he was forced to leave school after completing only 8 grades and go to work in the fields.
The fact that he only completed 8 grades of education is actually insanely important later. But let's fast forward a little bit. So they end up selling the farm and moving into the city of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Edgar later goes on to marry his love of his life. However, this is where things take a bit of a darker turn.
In 1900, Edgar and his father began working as traveling insurance agents, but the business seemed doomed to fail. Edgar caught cold and suddenly lost his voice. Unable to pitch his product, he returned to Hopkinsville and took a job that didn't require him to speak: apprentice photographer. It was immediately clear in photographs of the town and of his favorite model, fiancée Gertrude, that Edgar had found a talent. But after 10 months of unsuccessful medical treatments, Cayce was still without his normal speaking voice. He had lost all hope for a cure.
He tried everything. None of the doctors seemed able to help him. And the hypnotist in town, hypnotism was kind of a fad then.
And here's where the strange picks right back up.
And somebody suggested trying hypnotism.
Intrigued, Edgar arranged a meeting with a local hypnotist named Al Lane. He would never forget the date, March 31st, 1901.
It was on a Sunday afternoon, and that after church, and that Al Lane came out to the house on West 7th Street, and they went into the dining room and closed the doors.
Edgar was instructed on self-hypnosis and with surprising ease put himself to sleep. Lane gave him the hypnotic suggestion that he speak in a normal tone of voice. After a minute, he began to mumble. Then, to everyone's shock, Edgar said in a clear, unafflicted voice, "Yes, we can see the body."
We have the body. This is something that has bothered me for a long time about this story because of the consistency in which we're going to hear this coming up in the second half.
And he described the condition that he had. There was a circulatory problem in his throat. And it was said that it could be corrected by suggestion.
Cayce was given the hypnotic suggestion that his circulation returned to normal. After a moment, he sat up and spat blood.
I don't say he was cured, but he was better.
Do you remember earlier we talked about the entity that Mr. Cayce saw, and it's my opinion that this entity is the same one that is continuing to speak through him at this moment in time.
At that respect. And cousin Sarah, who I talked to before she died, that was Edgar's sister, youngest sister, said that they would not let her in the room, but she peeked through the keyhole and saw it happen.
Edgar was elated, but not for long. His throat ailment, called aphonia, returned several times over the next year. Each time, Lane would conduct the reading, as he called it, and restore Edgar's voice. Lane, a mail-order osteopath, began to wonder if Edgar could diagnose other patients' ailments as well.
Which Edgar was extremely reluctant to do.
He convinced Cayce to try.
And so it was Al Lane who pushed him to do this, pretty much against Edgar's will. Edgar didn't really feel comfortable doing that because he didn't understand it.
This is one part in the case file that really, really makes me stand up and take note. When you have somebody with, say, the ability to see things in the future or the ability to do things that are outside the consciousness is one thing. But when the same person starts having an internal conflict because of their religious beliefs, say Christianity in this particular case, then that really, really opens the door to a lot of reality or the reality of it being real. And what I mean is the person having a conflict wouldn't have the conflict if they weren't actually dealing with something. But this is a person who is a devout Christian, as we know, read his Bible once for every year of his life. Yet he has these things going on that he absolutely cannot explain. And this causes a heavy internal struggle.
While in his altered state, Edgar described illnesses in precise medical terms, in language he knew nothing about in his waking state. Detailed remedies followed.
Remember earlier we found out that Edgar had to drop out of school in the 8th grade in order to go work the farm, so he didn't have a large amount of school knowledge at all.
Sometimes he would call a prescription by name. I mean, take bromoquinine or take castor oil or whatever it was that he was using.
But these strange powers and their implications terrified Cayce. He had never studied medicine. He was no doctor and wondered what right he had to act like one.
And again, when you hear something like this from an experiencer, it really, as a paranormal researcher, makes you stand up and take note that they're having an internal struggle about this.
More and more he wanted out.
Who wouldn't say, I don't want this junk. It's too weird, it's too heavy. I don't want to see all this stuff or feel this kind of stuff or feel responsible for it.
As those with the gifts know, if you are not prepared in this and you really do not understand what's going on, then it can be very, extremely scary. Even for those that do understand what's going on, at times can be very, very scary things.
When a job opened up at a bookstore in Bowling Green, 30 miles from home, Edgar jumped at the chance. There he joined the nearby church and began teaching Sunday school, something he had done since his early teens. At 22, there was only one thing he missed back in Hopkinsville: his bride-to-be.
So earlier I said he had already gotten married. Apparently I'd misspoken. He had just gotten engaged at that time.
In June of 1903, after a 6-year engagement, Edgar Cayce and Gertrude Evans married. Cayce had begun his own photo studio in Bowling Green. He and his bride welcomed the escape from his reputation back home as a psychic doctor.
And this, yet another part of the case file that makes me as a paranormal researcher stand up and take note. He went as far as moving to a completely different town in order to escape people knowing that he had these abilities that scared even him.
He didn't know how he did it. He just knew that he was able to do it, and he wanted to use it to help people.
But Bowling Green soon learned about Cayce's abilities, and he could not say no to the needy. The readings resumed, and in the autumn of 1906, Edgar, then 29, was asked to demonstrate his trance diagnoses before local doctors.
Just when poor Edgar thought he had finally escaped it, it caught right back up with him. But remember, the angel told him as long as he heals the sick and afflicted, then he would be okay. So he tried to escape it, and God said, no, that's not the deal we made. But the biggest mistake that he made was attempting to let the doctors verify his abilities. This almost ended his career for good.
They came first thinking, I'll expose this guy. I'll see through him. You could see the condescension in their faces.
Yes, we have the body, Edgar declared as he would by routine at the beginning of every reading.
The more I hear that, the more I'm reminded of the spirit team on the other side that we talked about in the skull experiment. And the more I hear these stories, the more I wonder how true it is that there is a spirit team on the other side, or some team of spirits of some type that are working to try to help this side in every way possible. I don't know, some of us might call them angels.
He correctly diagnosed a college student's attack of typhoid fever. Then, unexpectedly, some of the doctors tested Edgar's trance state by sticking needles into his hands and feet, certain he was a fake. Cayce never flinched or bled, but when he awoke, he vowed angrily never again to be anyone's experiment.
And it's bad enough that they did this while the man was in a trance state, luckily while the man was in a trance state. But what's even worse is they did this without anyone's permission. They just decided to do it because they thought it was fakery. Although, as we heard, even they had to admit the fakery was not there.
Slowly he began to learn that there weren't that many who really cared. A lot of people wanted to use him. Not many wanted to listen.
And sadly, as we will find in the second half as we get more deeply into the specific readings that Edgar gave, this only becomes more and more apparent that people wanted to do nothing but use the man for his abilities.
Edgar's safe haven had always been the church. Now he wondered, as did his fellow churchgoers, whether his gift was a blessing or a curse.
Evidently, some of the people in the congregation really got upset, that thought that this character was teaching Sunday school to their children on Sunday morning.
Which, as we know, would be the classic reaction of any small-town Christian church, because they would call it nothing more than the devil's work and want them out of the Sunday school class teaching immediately, which is exactly what happened.
Edgar was accused of the church's worst offense, heresy. Though he was later declared innocent, it was a painful experience for Cayce. In response, he worked harder than ever, adding a second studio and taking on consignment $40,000 worth of art from New York. Business was so good that Edgar and Gertrude planned on building their own home with the profits.
But as we'll see, that tends to happen over and over again for Mr. Cayce, just when things are going good.
Then, disaster struck. 2 days before Christmas 1906, fire destroyed the studio. The unsold New York artwork would plunge Edgar $8,000 in debt. Incredibly, another fire would strike his second studio within the year. Edgar needed some good fortune. It came in a 9.5-pound bundle. Hugh Lynn Cayce was born in March of 1907. Edgar, the new father, eventually paid all his debts, but was forced to move in with Gertrude's disappointed family back in Hopkinsville.
And this will soon take us into the part of the story that most of us have heard the most often when we hear about Mr. Edgar Cayce.
There, his father introduced him to homeopathic practitioner Dr. Wesley Ketchum.
Ketchum was pretty much a promoter, and he wrote a paper that was read at a big clinical medical society in Boston. The New York Times covered this and gave Edgar a full-page treatment, which is hard to imagine these days.
The Times article, trumpeting Cayce as an illiterate, was widely read. Soon, over 10,000 letters requesting readings were sent to Edgar by the chronically ill or those who had lost hope with conventional doctors.
Now, not only was he giving readings for people and helping the sick and afflicted, because of this promoter's ad in the New York newspaper, now he is literally doing this worldwide for tens of thousands of people.
Many sent money, though Cayce had never charged for a reading before.
Yet another absolute sign of the integrity of the man known as Edgar Cayce. It could be one thing if he was charging every chance he got, but the man had never asked a penny for what he had done, up to the point that people just started sending him money.
Edgar knew that he didn't do it. It came through him, and it was a gift that could come through him. I think that's the reason his ability was so good, because he didn't have concern of making money on it. It was really pure to help other people.
And remember that even Jesus Christ said, with that true intent of heart, that childlike spirit, we would do things that he did and even greater things than he.
Ketchum offered to finance a photo studio in return for Edgar's readings. The time had arrived to decide how to use these powers. After a sleepless night, Edgar agreed, but on his own terms. His father would conduct the readings, and a stenographer record them for later review. And the money, nearly $2,000, would be sent back until services were rendered. Edgar's course was set.
And this is where the story of Edgar Cayce that we generally think of really starts to take off. So we'll get into the actual readings that he gave to many, many, many people around the world. And most of these, if not all of these, were recorded by the stenographer, remember. So we'll get into that after the break here in just a couple minutes, guys. And we'll be right back after these messages.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the City? Nope. Interview with a Vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect, unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the hey? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember in the car, my mind was in total disarray. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say we misremembered and call us bat crazy. Did you smoke a doob? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that. On with this Mandela effect flow. Mandela effect in the house. What in the world happened to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, yay! American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science fiction, but you gotta think outside the box and have no restrictions. Alternate realities and parallel dimensions. Okay, I get some of your apprehensions. Could this all be a spiritual evolution? Cause the human race has grown tired of this toxic pollution. Mandela effect in the house. No, I'm not going crazy. Some people, they just don't understand. That's just the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Osteen. Oh wait, Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the owl? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is definitely the Twilight Zone. This is crazy. Anyhow.
Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying the Dark Wolf's Den Show with Jerry Hicks? I know I am. If you've enjoyed the program up to this point, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live, which is every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. We're here at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, bringing you the very best in common sense radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Here's a look at the schedule for the weekend of programming ahead. I'll be back tomorrow night, Thursday, July 16th, with a look at Cheating Death. we'll look at ways and people who have actually cheated death. Then Friday, July 17th, Alive Again. The incredible Alive Again phenomenon could be coming to headlines near you. Tune in Friday, July 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. We'll dive down that rabbit hole together. Then Saturday, July 18th, A Fool and His Money Are Soon Parted. Is the future of finance leaning towards fool's gold standard? We'll find out that Saturday, July 18th, for our look at fool's gold. Then we'll end out the weekend together, Sunday, July 19th, with the letter Q. That's right. The Ripon Rabbit Hole live show will be brought to you Sunday, July 19th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, by the letter Q. And if you'd like a little bit of a clue to that, all of the shows this weekend in Q kind of pertain. An extension of last week's Blue Elvis, if you know what I mean. All I can say is the rabbit hole goes very deep as we end out the weekend, Sunday, July 19th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Add it to your calendars. Please be here. It's going to be a fun weekend ahead. Speaking of which, if you are subscribed to our mail list or if you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, we are expecting a special live broadcast on Friday, probably around 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm not certain on the time, so please stay tuned for further details. But Ripon, Wisconsin is going to host Vice President Mike Pence in the birthplace of the Republican Party on Friday, as he'll be there speaking with attendees at the Ripon College. So stay tuned as we'll bring you that. We're going to return to the Dark Wolf's Den show and Jerry Hicks in the exploration of Edgar Cayce in just a moment. A lot more to come here on the Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the RiponRabbitHole.com.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den show. Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm so glad to have every last one of you back for the second half, guys. You know, in the first half we talked about Mr. Edgar Cayce and everything leading up to how he ended up giving readings for people worldwide and even became up to 8 times a day in later life. But we'll get to that part here in a little while. Guys, it makes you wonder, what did it look like? Would you imagine if you were to be in the room watching what happened when Mr. Cayce went into this trance and started speaking in his sleep? Well, let's hear from somebody who was actually there, what it actually looked like.
It wasn't anything weird, as a lot of people would think. Dad would simply lie down on a couch or bed. He had a couch in his office. If he had a tie on, he would loosen his tie and just cross his hands over his stomach and just lay back and relax.
When Edgar's eyelids began to flutter, the conductor, Edgar's father, and Gertrude in later years would know Edgar was in trance. The suggestion was then given, the name of the person and where they would be at the time of the reading.
Now, the person could be in the room, or he could be in another state or another city. It didn't matter.
And every time Edgar would go into trance, he would be told where these people are, and then he would start out with, "We have the body," and then they would continue on with the questions from there. But what happens if the person isn't where the person is supposed to be at?
I remember one time he had a reading on a man who was supposed to be in an apartment in New York.
And remember, once again, Mr. Cayce is in Kentucky, and the person that's getting the reading is in New York, all the way up the coast.
Dad lay there a minute and says, "We do not have the body." I said, "He's not here." I said, "He's on a bus coming across town." I said, there was a traffic accident. The bus is late." I said, "He'll be here in a minute. We'll wait." And all of a sudden, he said, "He's come in now."
So I'm sure that one could argue that, well, he was just wasting time just trying to come up with something to say, right? But what if the story could be verified?
A call to the man in New York later verified everything Cayce had said.
Now, it's interesting that Cayce would know about a chance accident that slowed the bus down that particular day that made the man late on that particular day. At this point, Mr. Cayce is very much enjoying what he is doing again. However, as we know in Mr. Cayce's life, if something is going good...
But his newfound faith was betrayed by, of all people, his own father and Dr. Ketchum. When Edgar in trance asked any questions, as he always would, they began to ask for tips on the commodities market and even on horse races.
It's also said in some stories that I've heard about this case that Mr. Cayce would actually get physically sick after readings when asked about personal things like, personal fortunes that could be gained, like, lottery numbers, horse race winnings, everything the father and doctor were asking him about.
He began to discover that they were playing games with him. He became very angry, and he terminated his relationship with them and even left town.
And would subsequently end up never speaking to them again. But let's get into the readings themselves. These are some really, really crazy readings. We're not going to go in any particular order. We're just going to cover a large amount of topics at this point and the different readings that Mr. Cayce gave on these particular topics. As everyone knows, we did the reincarnation episode a little while back, and we spoke about Mr. Cayce and his beliefs in the afterlife and how things worked in the afterlife. But he said at one time in his readings that he actually met death.
I went out and I realized that I had contacted death as a personality, as an individual, or as a being. Realizing this, I remarked to death, "You're not as ordinarily pictured with a black mask or hood or skeleton or like Father Time or the sickle. Instead, you're fair and rosy-cheeked and robust. You have a pair of scissors." In fact, I had to look twice at the feet or limbs or even at the body to see it take shape. He replied, "Yes, death is not what many seem to think. It's not a horrible thing, which is often often pictured. Just a change, just a visit. The scissors are indeed the implements most representative of life and death to man. These indeed unite by dividing, and divide by uniting."
I just absolutely love that. Unite by dividing and divide by uniting.
The cord does not, as usually thought, extend from the center, but is broken from the head.
And I've often went on record saying that I do believe that the consciousness that inhabits every human being is in through a proxy through the subconscious mind, which I believe would be right about that same spot that the soft spot would be on in a young baby.
The forehead. That soft portion we see pulsing in an infant. Hence we see old people, unbeknowing to themselves, gain strength from youth by kissing there, and the youth gains wisdom by such kisses. Indeed, the vibrations may be raised to such an extent as to rekindle or reconnect the cord, even as the Master did with the Widow of Nain. For he did not take him by the hand, which was bound to the body, as was the custom of the day, but rather stroked him on the head, and the body took life of itself, of life itself. So you see, the silver cord may be broken, but the vibration, and here my experience ended, he said.
And to me, that just makes all kind of sense. It may not be way reality works according to some of the materialists, but I gotta say, to me, it makes absolute sense. Another question that is really one that I've thought about many times, and one that actually got posed to Mr. Cayce, and that is the question of what is it like from Mr. Cayce's side? What does Mr. Cayce see when he's doing this?
Cayce's readings, which were expanding in detail and scope, were also encouraging. He began to describe as best he could the journey his consciousness would take when in trance.
He would describe moving up through a beam of light, passing images and sounds, and his consciousness moving to other dimensions that are related to vast sources of information.
Cayce called this source of information the Akashic Record, where every thought, sound, or event from the beginning of time is recorded.
And to reiterate, Edgar Cayce just called the Akashic Records a completely different dimension, and would go on to describe it as a dimension of pure consciousness.
He believed he could access this resource as well as his subject's subconscious mind telepathically to answer any question posed to him. The concept boggled the mind, then as now.
That this man would lie down on a couch and essentially go to sleep and come up with this information, it's just too big a jump for lots of scientists and trained medical professionals today.
And I would like to remind people once again that the man did not even finish an 8th grade education because of the having to go work in the fields with the family. So he never actually got a formal education and knew a lot of this stuff that he ended up knowing somehow through the Akashic Record. Cayce, after the incident with his father and the doctor Ketchum, he would end up going to Dayton, Ohio. And later on, his abilities would, of course, show themselves again because he cannot help but to help the sick and afflicted. And something strange happened, even by Mr. K, to remind him.
In Dayton, Cayce underwent a radical change. During a reading for his potential investor, Edgar was asked deep metaphysical questions about the nature of the human soul. Cayce, in trance, began to talk of his questioner's past lives.
Remember, to this point, he had mainly only given holistic advice and hadn't really given anything on past lives or anything to do with past lives, and was a devout Christian who read his Bible every day, so past lives is not something that he would be talking about in a normal waking consciousness.
Well, this really blew Edgar over, because this ran counter not only to what he believed, he said, as a Christian, but what he taught as a Sunday school teacher.
Edgar knew the Gospels well and wondered why the Bible never mentioned reincarnation, if indeed it was real. Cayce began to study the scriptures in a new context.
And he said it soon became evident to him that there were places in the Bible which, if you read them and read them carefully, you could see that they supported the idea of reincarnation.
And for more information on that, make sure you go back and check out our reincarnation episode where we discussed just that.
Cayce's readings on past lives became known as life readings, as opposed to the physical readings he previously had been giving.
And so he started giving readings for everybody in his family, and they'd all had past lives according to his readings. And many of their lives, they were together in some other place, ancient Egypt primarily.
Anybody familiar with the idea of soul groups will understand this completely. This is the idea that there is a group of us, souls, if you will, and everybody is in a group, and these are the people that you run into over life. These are the people that stick with you. Those people that you meet and, they're with you most of your lives, and you end up with a group of people, your group of friends or your group of really close friends and family that actually probably traveled with you through a multitude of lifetimes.
Edgar began studying other beliefs, from Hinduism to the religions of ancient Egypt and Greece. He would withhold judgment on reincarnation for some years. It was, after all, unprovable. But Cayce wondered whether his readings on past lives could be just as accurate as one of his physical readings, which he and others were able to verify. With so many questions at hand, Cayce's future seemed inescapable. In 1923, at 46, he became a full-time psychic, a vocational choice that few understood, many ridiculed, and added little to his bank account.
Partly because there's really no money in such a thing. The other part because, well, let's be honest, Edgar wasn't the best with money. But the really interesting life readings is when it comes to Mr. Cayce's own life readings.
Edgar's personal life readings indicated 17 different incarnations as a high priest in Egypt, a nomadic ruler in Persia, and in the fabled Atlantis, which he mentioned nearly 700 times. He described a highly advanced society that collapsed over a span of 40,000 years, with its survivors settling partly in Egypt.
Cayce actually said quite a bit about the lost continent of Atlantis. And I'm going to go ahead and read some specific articles right from the readings. It says, yes, we have the subject. Remember, yes, we have the body. Well, it also works with the subjects too. The lost continent of Atlantis and those conditions. As has been said, much data has been received from time to time through psychic forces as respecting conditions in or through the period or ages of this continent's existence. That the continent existed is being proven as a fact. The position of the continent Atlantis occupied is that as between the Gulf of Mexico on the one hand and the Mediterranean upon the other. Evidences of this lost civilization are to be found in the Pyrenees and Morocco on the one hand, British, Honduras, Yucatan, and America upon the other. There are some protruding portions with this that must have at one time or another been a portion of this great continent. The British West Indies or the Bahamas, and a portion of the same that may be seen in the present if the geological survey would be made in some of these, especially or notably in Bimini and in the Gulf Stream, through this vicinity, these may be even yet determined, Edgar Cayce Readings 364-3. Now, this is really interesting because you remember our last episode, we noted that Mr. Cayce actually said that Bimini Road, or the Atlantis evidence, would be found around 68 or 69. Bimini Road was uncovered in 1968. He also spoke, like we just heard, about a lot of Atlanteans actually making it to Egypt. Well, we've got a couple life readings from a couple different people where he references this very thing. Before the entity was in the Egyptian land, but of the Atlantean peoples, when there was exodus from Atlantis, what is now Spanish and Pyrenees, and then Egypt, the name was Exter-El. And the next one comes from a reading from the number 3184-1. Says, quote, before that, the entity was in Atlantis during those periods when there were the separations just before the breaking up of Pisidia, the name that was Anaon. And according to Cayce, Atlantis was broken into three larger islands. Poseidon, Arion, and I cannot remember the name of the third one right off the top of my head, and I do apologize. Before that, the entity was in the Yucatan land, and when the people settled there who came from Atlantis, the entity was a priestess. The name was Quitel. All of this are different readings. That last one was from reading number 3590-1. He also spoke of the Egyptian Hall of Records, or Egypt in general. In about 1,200 readings on Egypt, Cayce reveals the origin, purpose, and prophecies of the Great Pyramid, and the Sphinx, ancient rulers, and Cayce's own past lives as the High Priest Ra-Ta, who wanted to unify the spiritual teachings of the people. Cayce's precognitive readings also revealed a lush landscape along the Nile, and stated the Nile has changed its course and once entered the Atlantic Ocean. The Nile entered into the Atlantic Ocean. What is now the Sahara was an inhabited land and very fertile. What is now the central portion of this country, of the Mississippi Basin, was then all in the ocean. Only the plateau was existent. Only the regions that are now portions of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona form the greater part of what we know as the United States. Edgar Cayce Reading 364-13. This theory seems to be confirmed with an article published in Science, the magazine, August 1986, reported that the Space Shuttle imaging radar had discovered previously unknown river valleys beneath the driest part of the Sahara. Through satellite imaging and on-site archaeological investigations, it appeared as though the present-day Nile had changed its course, once flowing across the Sahara, through Africa, and into the Atlantic Oceans. This is very interesting, considered that that's exactly what Cayce said it did before having any of this knowledge. Quote, in those periods when the first change had come in the position of the land, there had been an egress of peoples from the Atlantean land, and they built a city near the edge of the Sahara. Edgar Cayce Readings 5748-6. the one in the Atlantean land that sank, which will rise and is rising again, another in the place of records that leadeth from the Sphinx to the Hall of the Records in the Egyptian land, and another in the Aryan or Yucatan land where the temple there is overshadowing Sang. Edgar Cayce reading 2012-1. And lastly, numerous readings contend that this Hall of Records will be discovered, a record of Atlantis from the beginnings, and the developments of the people throughout their sojourn, with their record of the first destruction and the changes that took place in the land. Edgar Cayce readings 3718-6, and this is only just a small portion of everything that he said about Atlantis.
Cayce had no apology for the limits of his psychic ability, why he was accurate in one instance and not in another. Though he continued to make world predictions, he never considered himself a prophet.
I don't think he was a prophet as such. I mean, he did make statements about the future, but he always said the future is not fixed. You know, we can change it.
And as we've heard from people like John Teeter on this show, that the future can be changed. It is not set in stone. Our little actions along the way can change the course of the larger events eventually, kind of like a butterfly effect style. And do I think this makes an issue with my time lock theory? No, not at all. I still believe there are certain events or moments in time that are time locked, yet not everything is. So small things can be changed, and these time-locked moments can be changed to some other type of time-locked moment based on these smaller butterfly effects that happen through time. Thus, the predictions like world wars or climate changes, small things that are done by man and or in the solar system, or even random changes in the sun, could bring about a delay in the timing of when these things are predicted.
By the mid-1930s, Edgar Cayce had gained a loyal following as a gifted psychic. Skeptics could say he made the whole thing up, but the hundreds of verified physical readings were difficult to dispute. He was right about the crash of 29, and in 1935 predicted the Japanese would join Germany and Austria as a world threat, a bizarre idea at the time. But some readings were so astonishing that even supporters had difficulty grasping them. Cayce said the Earth's poles would shift in 1936, resulting in massive geological changes. Cayce predicted flooding would destroy cities on both coasts of North America, and new land, the sunken remnants of Atlantis, would dramatically appear off Florida by 1969.
And Cayce would finally get to see one of his final lifetime dreams come true.
By the early 1940s, Edgar and Gertrude had settled into a comfortable home on Lake Holly, which doubled as headquarters for the ARE, Edgar's Association for Research and Enlightenment.
Which still exists today and is an absolute utter treasure of information. So if you're really interested in the Cayce readings, I would definitely look into this research in Enlightenment Academy. Guys, I have one last big surprise for you guys. You know how I like to bring you little rare stuff and things you don't hear very many times, very many places. Well, I have a recording, the only known recording of Mr. Edgar Cayce. Take a listen to this.
Though thousands of Cayce's readings were transcribed, only one audio recording survives. In a reading on his own health, Cayce, a lifelong smoker, is asked if he should cut down on his smoking.
Any stimuli to expect is and moderation. Moderation would mean for this body anywhere from 3 to 6 to 8 smokes a day. Above this will be expected.
And that is, of course, the voice of Mr. Edgar Cayce, giving himself his own life reading about smoking. How very intriguing. I mean, I tell you, the fact that that even exists is really friggin' incredible in my opinion. But guys, speaking of incredible, it's been an incredible show so far. I really appreciate it, everybody. I appreciate you guys hanging out with this new retooled show. Thank you, Mr. Walt, for the extra recordings you've done for us and the intros and outros. We really, really appreciate you doing that for us, bud. Also, the music, the bumper music we've got tonight, thanks to Juanito 1975, as well as Chick and Michael Musco for the opening and closing bumper music. So thank you guys so much for use of your music and sound. I appreciate that. But ladies and gentlemen, final thoughts tonight.
Celebrated American psychic Edgar Cayce would lie down, pray, and enter a trance-like state of altered consciousness. In this state, Cayce diagnosed illnesses in medical terms he knew nothing of awake. He described distant events as they were happening, talked of past lives and incarnations in the fabled Atlantis. He predicted the stock market crash of 1929, the fall of communism, and warned of cataclysmic earth changes that would send cities tumbling into the sea. Through thousands of his readings, as they are called, Edgar Cayce has become the most documented psychic of the 20th century.
So what do you think? Do you think he actually had abilities like nobody else in the world and the ability to read the Akashic Record? Or do you think somehow he pulled off one of the biggest hoaxes of all time? Ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for tonight's show, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate every last one of you being here, whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat. We appreciate you having us right there with you. That's right. Guys, the den may be closing, but don't you worry, the weekend fun is only just begun. Come on back Thursday through Sunday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for AJ the Ripon Rabbit's Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. He's got some amazing topics coming up this week, guys. As you know, these big old wolf ears like to eavesdrop on those rabbits over there, and we know what they're about to talk about this week. Guys, some great topics. Thursday night, he's going to be discussing cheating death. That's tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. Then Friday night, he's going to carry the theme on with a show called Alive Again. So from cheating death to really cheating death and coming back to life. Then Saturday night, he'll be talking about fool's gold and the future of finance. Maybe he'll pull a special guest star on there. I can think of somebody who might be interested in that topic. Maybe he'll talk about Bitcoin. That would be awesome. I can't wait to see what he's going to talk about on that show. And then Sunday night, guys, I promise this is one you are not going to want to miss. I know I say that a lot, but if you like the letter Q, well, you might want to tune in for this one. And I have a feeling he's talking about more than just the alphabet. Guys, I'm about to go hang out in my favorite location. You can join me. It's very easy. Just go on over to the riponrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. That's right. Over there, you're going to find the VIP 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That is my favorite hangout. I love to go back there every night of the week. You can find me hanging out back there at least most every night, if at all possible. Just go on, scroll down halfway down the page. You're going to find the VIP 24/7 hour lounge entrance. You will have to okay your microphone and camera, but you can turn that off immediately. Guys, I'm going to go over there and hang out. You should go over there and check out the riponrabbithole.com. By the way, you heard Propagate This Light's shout out at the beginning of this show. We appreciate you, Propagate. You guys want to have your shout out played at the beginning of the show? It's really easy to do. All you got to do is scroll down to the very bottom of every single page on the riponrabbithole.com. At the very bottom, you're going to find a big red button. Hit that button, you'll record 30 seconds of audio, and they'll ship it to us in the studio on your behalf, and it will play on the air. That I can promise you, as you heard earlier tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and this is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. On behalf of AJ the Ripon Rabbit and everybody at Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, we thank you for being here with us, and make sure you come back Thursday through Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. I'm Jerry Hicks, the Dark Wolf, and remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. Oh, yeah. That's right, baby.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Hello again, it's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Did you enjoy this kickoff to the weekend with Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den Show and a special look at Edgar Cayce? If you did, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. Jerry Hicks will return next Wednesday night with another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show as he kicks off the weekend with the Animals of Radio, Jerry Hicks, the Dark Wolf's Den, every Wednesday night. Here's a look at the schedule for the weekend of programming ahead. I'll be back tomorrow night, Thursday, July 16th, with a look at cheating death. We'll look at ways and people who have actually cheated death. Then Friday, July 17th, Alive Again. The incredible Alive Again phenomenon could be coming to headlines near you. Tune in Friday, July 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. We'll dive down that rabbit hole together. Then Saturday, July 18th, A Fool and His Money Are Soon Parted. Is the future of finance leaning towards fool's gold standard? We'll find out that Saturday, July 18th, for our look at fool's gold. Then we'll end out the weekend together, Sunday, July 19th, with the letter Q. That's right. The Ripon Rabbit Hole live show will be brought to you Sunday, July 19th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, by the letter Q. And if you'd like a little bit of a clue to that, all of the shows this weekend in Q kind of pertain. An extension of last week's Blue Elvis if you know what I mean. All I can say is the rabbit hole goes very deep as we end out the weekend Sunday, July 19th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Add it to your calendars. Please be here. It's going to be a fun weekend ahead. And that is no joke, because I'm going to tell you, we are going to do a live broadcast on Friday morning, July 17th, somewhere around 9 a.m. Pacific. We will go live. We'll be live for several hours that morning, as I am absolutely excited to announce that Vice President Mike Pence will be visiting Ripon, Wisconsin, Friday, July 17th. And we're going to bring you the action as it happens live from Ripon, Wisconsin, Friday morning, July 17th. If you haven't hit that bell and subscribe, make sure you do so. The weekend starts off right here. It's going to be a wild weekend, let me tell you. Cue up the next track, please. This weekend is diving down that rabbit hole. We'll see you then. A lot more to come. Look forward to spending the time with you.
Are you a YouTube creator that's tired of fighting over copyright issues for using the wrong music in your videos? Or perhaps a songwriter looking for something new? I know when I started Dark Wolf's Den, I needed some original music, and for me, the answer was a no-brainer. I immediately called Tom Bayless of Red Shed Studios. Tom has been in the music industry for over 20 years and has a true passion for the art. So if you need a custom soundtrack for your next project, make sure you contact Tom Bayless at Red Shed Studios at 920-344-7634. That's 920-344-7634. Red Shed Studios. Don't you wish that your weekend was longer than just 2 days? Well, if so, then you're in luck, because here on Ripon Common Sense Radio, our weekend begins on Wednesday. Yes, you heard that right. Our weekend kicks off every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with Dark Wolf's Den, starring yours truly, Jerry the Dark Wolf. But that's where the fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back every Thursday through Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show, starring AJ the Ripon Rabbit. He dives into the archives of vocal legend Art Bell and brings those stories up to date. So make sure that you spend your extended weekends with the Animals Radio, Jerry the Dark Wolf and AJ the Ripon Rabbit, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, every Wednesday through Sunday, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio.